What's your most accidental baddest moment? Was in a restaurant with my girlfriend at the time when a guy built like a refrigerator just comes barging through and knocks my girlfriend's drink all over her. It was clearly an accident based on his refrigerator-like physique and being unable to hold his arms at his side point. At this point I'm standing up to help clean her up and figure he's going to apologize or something. Instead he pushes my shoulder and tells me to get out of the way and let the beach clean herself up. I stare at him and say that beach is my girlfriend. You damn well better apologize to her. So the woman and man at the table next to us are notably getting nervous. She drops her menu off the table. By some fluke I catch the menu flat along the top of my foot before it hits the ground and proceed to just raise my foot, keeping the menu on top of it. I grab the menu into my hand, all the while glaring into this guy's eyes. I just tell her, sorry ma'am, you seem to have dropped this. I just look at him and say, so, I think we left it off where you were going to apologize to my girlfriend for being so rude and then walking around. Much to my surprise, he turned to my girlfriend and said, I'm terribly sorry, and then turned around and walked away. Our check was taken care of as well. I've caught light things like pieces of paper on top of my foot, but never something like a menu, and I was always terrible at hacky sack. I worked at a Boy Scout camp years and years ago. One of the activities I was in charge of was building a log cabin. Part of building the log cabin is to strip all the bark off the wood to help keep the logs from rotting. The scouts generally had a love-hate relationship with this step of the project. On the plus side they got to use sharp objects. On the minus side it was hard manual labor. While they were using bark strippers, I was using a chisel to get the bark off around knots. Normally using a chisel on wood is not a hazardous operation as long as the blade is facing away from you. One day I was not doing well on my safety observance. I was trying to jam a stubborn piece of bark off the wood with the blade facing toward my arm. The wood broke against the force. The blade kept on trucking through the bark and into my wrist. At this point the scouts knew something was wrong as they saw me curse, drop the chisel, and grab my arm. I was the only adult present, so I was fighting to keep my calm as to not panic the scouts. My solution was to turn it into a first aid lesson. I told a couple of scouts to get the first aid kit and the others to help me over the picnic bench. I told them they were going to have an impromptu first aid lesson on severe bleeding and shock with the victim as their instructor. The scouts were able to keep their heads together and get the health officer out to our location to treat me the rest of the way. They said it was the best first aid class they had ever had. At the end of the high school year in gym class, when it was too hot to do anything outside, the bleachers would be out in the gym and 95% of people would sit on them, while the 5% who wanted to do something would be shooting some hoops waiting for the period to be over. I was in that 5%, but there was a, not literally, retarded kid who would always try to run up and steal the basketball and throw it all the way across the gym. If he ever touched the ball, you would have to go 200 feet to get it back. If he didn't steal it from you the first time, he would tackle people to the ground and then get it and throw it. Huge douche. He was strolling towards me one day and I knew what he was planning. So when he was about 10 feet from me, I just sprinted down the court towards the other side of the gym with my ball in hand, and he took chase. About halfway down the court, where everyone was sitting on the bleachers, I decide to ditch the ball so I can run faster and not get tackled from behind by a pretty meaty dude. I threw the ball basically straight up as I was running, and by some freak of luck he did not see the ball coming down, and it blasted him exactly on his face, and he fell on his ass and was rolling around confused for a while everyone laughed at him. After I saw what happened, I ran to the top end of the bleachers because I figured it would be safer if he couldn't find me, but right after he got up he spotted me and stormed up the bleachers like he was going to beat the shit out of me. He got up in my face trying to start a fight, but I didn't want to do anything due to my school's very strict no fighting policy, so I just held my hands up politely like, what do you want me to do? After about a minute of him screaming at me and everyone watching intently, he decides he wants to shove me, but he somehow didn't realize that I was sitting against a wall and would therefore not move very much. He tried to push me, but instead he just flung his own body down the bleacher stairs and slid all the way to the bottom. He ended up getting suspended for fighting, and all I got was props from the entire class TLDR. Got a bully to run face first into a basketball and then fling himself down a flight of stairs. Edit. He was not actually retarded. He was just a jerk. He was in app English with me but none of the other app classes. I'm in San Diego with 2 girlfriends for the weekend. We are bar hopping and end up at this huge, noisy club. At this point we are all completely wasted. We see someone come on stage and say there will be a girls versus boys contest and they would pick 6 contestants. Of course, I'm the lucky one to get picked as one of the female contestants. The club is incredibly loud, so I can't really hear the instructions, but I get the gist. Each person must take a shot while wearing a boxing glove with one hand behind their back. The team who finishes all 3 shots first wins. I then hear the audience gasping, but I didn't catch what the announcer said. So, the game begins. The first 2 girls in front of me take their shots, as do the 2 boys. At this point, it's a dead heat. I'm up next, and the guy I'm up against is having a real hard time taking the shot, looking at it with disgust, not picking it up. I wonder what the fuck is wrong with him, since it's just a stupid tequila shot. So, I pick it up with my boxing glove and swig it with a smile on my face. The audience gasps again and starts screaming and cheering. I won the contest and free drinks for the night. Point afterward, people are coming up to shake my hand and patting me on the back. After getting another drink I meet up with one of my friends. She says that was amazing. I can't believe you ate that worm. What? I frantically ask her what was in the shot. She looks at me with utter disbelief and says there was a huge tequila worm at the bottom of the glass. Did you not see it? Apparently, I was too drunk to notice and hadn't heard them say that there was a huge faking worm at the bottom of the last competitor's glass. I gagged and freaked out for a moment, but then settled into a nice fuck yeah, TL. Doctor, entered shot contest at a bar, drank a giant worm without knowing, got free drinks, and looked like a badass. This happened in my skydiving years. It was a Saturday morning. There was a group of girls from the nearby college wanting to jump. So the daring, including myself, wanted to do a hop and pop to show the girls what skydiving looks like. Point we get to altitude, jump, deploy our chutes, and start to show off our crazy canopy skills. I decide that I'll do a hook turn. They look cool from the ground and my canopy colors were blue and pink. Well, after some tugs on my toggles, my hook turn collapses my canopy. It turns into a low hook turn. Low hook turns usually end up with a visit to the hospital or the morgue, usually the latter with my canopy folded over. I'm doing revolutions. My altitude is too low to cut away and use my reserve. So I think to myself that this is it. I hope this doesn't hurt too bad. I hope I can walk away. On the bright side, my lines didn't wrap around the canopy, so there is a possibility that I can pull it out before impact. From the people on the ground, all they saw were some skydivers coming in for a landing, swinging like a pendulum, and some of them coming in to kick this inflatable target we had at RDZ. They could tell that something wasn't right with one of the divers, me, because his chute wasn't open and he was spinning parallel to the ground. Point the most important thing to do in skydiving is to make everything you do look cool. Atheists, bear with me here. With 100 feet to go before impact, I pump my toggles, release, and my canopy unfurls and inflates as if the hands of God raked his fingers through my lines and pulled my canopy tight. This put my body position perpendicular with no inches to spare for a walk-in landing. The crowd applauds with oohs and ahs, including the experienced divers who knew what was happening. I bow, gather my stuff, and go in the clubhouse to calm my nerves. My buddies told the students he does that all the time, and they knew I was shaken. Point I met my old dive buddies a few months ago. We live in different states now, and they brought up that experience as one of the craziest things they have ever seen. Oh, maybe junior year of high school, I used to stay after school to avoid going home. Some girl 1 year below me came up to me with her friends, acting flirty. Her girlfriend and 3 guys walked away. I did not think much of it at the time. Fast forward about 30 minutes, and the girl that I was talking to said that she was worried about her friend and why she was still gone. She said that her friend went in the auditorium and asked if I would see if she is still there. I walk into the auditorium and all the lights are off, except for the band pit. I make my way down there and hear a girl say no, no, let go. I flipped a bit and mustered up a yell while charging the band pit. 3 guys take off, followed by the girls. About a month later, my dean walks into my classroom and says that she needs to escort me to the principal's office. Mind you, my school was huge, so while walking to the other building where the principal's office was located, I asked if this was about my skipping gym class a bunch of times. She said no, but whatever it was about must be really big to warrant her escorting me to the principal. We get to the office and I see 2 cops and the 2 girls that I met a month before. Freaking the fuck out, I sit down and the cops say, "Thank you." What the fuck? I was asked some questions and was informed that the 3 guys were attempting to rap the girl. I guess I stumbled in at the right time. I had not spoken to my father for months at this time in my life, but received a call from him that night. The school called to tell him what I had done. My pops told me that I was his hero. That was a good day. Having just gotten out of a particularly long lecture, I decided I needed a smoke. It was the dead of winter, so I was wearing a full-length navy coat, but I hadn't buttoned it up yet as I walked toward the door. Desperately I searched the coat pockets for my smokes and my lighter. I found them in opposing pockets with each hand point. Without breaking stride, I put a cigarette in my mouth, put the case away, and begin to raise the lighter to the cigarette. Realizing that both of my hands are still busy, I realize I can't effectively open the door. Call it poor planning. Time slowed and my mind raced to think of a solution point as the door loomed ahead of me. I realize that the only way I can continue out the door to smoke as soon as possible is to kick the door open. I lean back, raise my foot to mid-door level, kick, ignite the lighter, and pass swiftly through the door. I kick too hard though. The door swings widely and almost hits the side of the building. I'm still traveling through with the momentum from the kick. I bring the lighter down and pocket it. I exhaled smoke into the evening air and put my hand in the other coat pocket. A blast of cold winter air, peppered with small flakes of snow, blew my coat back majestically. It was then that time sped back up and I realized that everyone walking by the building had stopped and turned to look at me. I went to a private school, which was composed of really sheltered kids and a handful of troubled kids that had been kicked out of public school. I guess their parents thought our school was more disciplined, which I don't think it was. In the 7th grade I began taking taekwondo. The best parts about the class were the moves designed to break someone's hold. I was late for class one morning, and in the empty hall I ran into a bully named Wade, think Mo from Calvin and Hobbes, who started giving me some shit about something, though I can't remember what. I tried to just move past him and go to class, but he grabbed me by the shirt collar and shoved me against the lockers, continuing to yell at me. This was my chance. I snapped into action and broke his grasp with a move I had learned in taekwondo, but the move was supposed to end in me bending his arm back with my elbow so that the attacker would end up in a hold. Unfortunately my elbow missed its mark, so even though I broke his grasp and did kind of a fancy looking but botched move, it ended in me weakly holding just one of his wrists. I realized I blew it and didn't know what to do next, so I awaited my pummeling. Wade looked down at me holding his wrist, a result he had not anticipated. His facial expression changed, stamped off and said, "Gore, Nick, I was just joking." He didn't bother me again after that, except once to ask if I had done it with this girl I dated in the 5th grade. What a dope. I was about 17 when I was walking with my younger brother and two of his friends. They were all about 12. A car full of people passes and yells at us and flips us off. I knew who it was, so I flipped them off and yelled, "Fuck you," back at them. We continued along and cut through an empty parking lot enclosed by trees to take a shortcut to our destination. The car I flipped off comes flying into the parking lot, people screaming, tires squealing. My little brother and his friends are scared shitless. I walked over to the car laughing because of the way the younger kids with me were acting, and was going to give my friends in the car a good laugh. When I get to the car I stick my head damn near in the driver's window, still laughing, and realize I had no idea who any of these people were. My laughing face turned to a morbid "I'm about to get my ass kicked" face. which the people in the car must have interpreted as maniacal laughter turning into a death stare. It scared the shit out of them, and I recall hearing passengers screaming at the driver to get the fuck out of there, he's going to kill us. The car peeled away, and I walked back to rejoin my brother and his friends, and they all thought I was the coolest, most badass older teen they'd ever meet. Late one summer evening at a nightclub in Atlantic City, New Jersey, I made one of those "I instantly regret this decision" comments. A couple of single friends were ogling the eye candy on the dance floor when I said, "You are all single because you don't have the balls to go and talk to them." Regret hadn't fully set in before the sharks smelled blood and began to circle. "Why don't you show us how it's done, hotshot?" they all sneered. Now, some quick calculations told me that it's better to take my chances with the foxes than to stay there and get eaten by the wolves. Don't you know mixed metaphors are the new black? So without hesitation, I swaggered my way towards one of the sexiest women I have ever seen in my life. Well, outside of a JPG, of course. Anyway, I'm just about to say hi when my feet took it upon themselves to save my dignity and walk me right up to the bar. Sure enough, the wolves started howling from across the club, and to put off the inevitable torture, I ignored the flack and ordered up a drink. Point reader, you should know that I'm not a bad looking guy, but I certainly should spend a few more hours in the gym and lay off the beer a bit. So what was to happen next was beyond my wildest expectations. With my drink in one hand and my pride on the line, I turned around to take a chance at redeeming myself, and this beautiful woman is walking right towards me with her friends all around. Instantly, I gulped down about half a glass of liquid courage on the rocks and cleared my throat. "Oh no, I was just about to come dance with you," I said. "Hey, I didn't have time to come up with something clever." She looked at me, and with a surprised look she says, "Great, I'll come find you after I get a drink." Point at that moment, you could have seen my ego from space. Honestly, I'll admit it, I was singing "Oh Yeah" by Yellow in my head. Anyone who knows their stuff about acting cool will tell you, when you do something cool, act like you're not excited. Act like you do it all the time and you are practically bored with it. This is what cool people do, and so should you. Point seeing me walk away from her, my friends thought I was shot down, and the look on my face must have confirmed it in their minds. They hooted and hollered as I made what seemed to be a walk of shame all the way back to my crew. When I got so close I couldn't pretend not to hear them anymore, I put this puzzled look on my face so convincing you would have thought they were speaking Swahili. FYI, I don't speak Swahili. "What's up?" I said soberly. "Got shot down, huh?" someone asked. "Why would you say that?" I replied, trying to buy myself some time to build the suspense or to delay the inevitable if she just blew me off. We bickered back and forth. I kept avoiding the answers, and they kept putting in their jabs at my expense. But then it happened. Her brown eyes alone would make you beg for more. And the dress she wore that night was like a sunset red, with an open back that dropped down to her slender waist, exposing her perfectly tan skin, enough to make your mouth water. The guys I was with backed away startled when she approached, like she was dangerous to touch. Cool and confident, I asked if she was ready and she smiled. "Let's go." Point I've never felt so bad as in all my life, and I doubt I ever will again. Point TLDR, I picked up a woman who was super hot, even though I chickened out on my first attempt. Well, when I was in high school, I had a crappy little 12/13-year-old, at the time, Honda Civic. I used to treat this car like crap. I would take corners at 40 miles per hour. I would skid around bends like there was no tomorrow. I had a lead foot. I liked to weave in traffic. Basically, for a time, I was that asshole on the road. Point anyway, one of the things my friends and I loved to do was something we called tray surfing, where you would stick two of those fast food plastic trays under the rear wheels of a front wheel drive car, pull up the handbrake, and drive in as tight a circle as you can, as fast as you can. Naturally, the lower friction of the plastic trays causes the car to spin like crazy, and it's fun. Point so one night, we are doing that on the top of a parking structure. When we decide it's time to leave, I start speeding down the structure, skidding around the corners, making a lot of noise, and being an immature douchebag. At one bend, I get cocky, and I decide to pull a handbrake turn. This is, of course, something I've done countless times, and no doubt I'll be able to pull it off again, right? Well, as soon as I pull the handbrake, I realize something's wrong. First off, I've pulled it too early. Secondly, I didn't turn the wheel enough. Time slows down, and I realize it's too late to disengage the handbrake when the car turns 45 degrees toward a concrete wall. My car is still traveling in the same direction, though, so I turn the wheel toward my momentum. The car keeps sliding in the same direction, and finally I clear the wall, but now the car has spun more, beyond the point where I can keep the wheels pointed in the direction I'm moving. I spin the wheels the other way, so that they're lined up again, just backwards, and I must have been off a bit, because the car starts to change direction toward the end of the wall, swinging around again. Finally, I disengage the handbrake and slam on the foot brake, heading straight for a concrete pillar. I'm so sure I've hit the wall, because the car stops so suddenly. I ask one of my friends to pop out and check out the damage, because I can't look. He starts cracking up and holds up 2 fingers to show how close I was. I get out and can't believe my eyes. The car is, quite literally, about a quarter inch from the wall. Wheel broke down laughing like crazy. Anyway, that was long, so TLDR, almost hit a wall because I was an idiot. Pulled a save out of my due to ninja driving skills. When I was a kid in elementary school, there was a bully on the bus who would give shit to all of us. He'd call us names, tell us he could beat us up etc. Coincidentally, he lived in my neighborhood, except a different stop than mine. I really don't like seeing people or animals that can't defend themselves get abused, and I will always try and step in if given the chance. So one day I told him that he should get off at my stop so I can make him put his money where his mouth was. He gets off at my stop along with my friend, who was one of the major victims of his bullying. The fight starts with lots of name calling, and he starts charging at me after I called him something ridiculous out of movie, I'm sure. Being the Ninja Turtle and Karate Kid fan that I was, and still am today, I decided to open up with a flurry of roundhouse kicks. Well, about the 3rd roundhouse kick in, I connect my heel to his dome, and he gets obliterated to the ground and runs home crying with a bloody nose. The next day his dad comes on the bus saying all these lies about how I beat his kid up, and I'm a bully. Well, I was friends with the bus driver and he gave the kid's father the whole story about how I was standing up for everyone on the bus, and how his kid is the real bully. I was a hero to my bus and the bully was a quiet little bitch from then on. My senior year of high school, I was sitting at lunch with my punk/dork friends. The next table over was full of gangbangers, and one of them is staring at the girl I like. I don't remember why, but I decided to stare back at the kid, I guess because he was being obnoxious, and I thought it was weird. Eventually he notices, and starts staring back at me, giving me hard looks. After a minute he's like, "What are you, a faggot?" To which I replied, "You're the one staring at me, man." His friends laugh, so he gets up and starts talking crap, which seriously went something like this. "Hey Bussy, you fucking Bussy, you want to start something Bussy?" Now, I'm sitting down at the table, he's behind me standing over me, and I'm scared out of my mind. I'm about 5 feet 6 inches and he's a good bit taller than me. I've never been in a fight, and don't plan on changing that. But his friends are watching in amusement and I have enough friends next to me that I guess I was feeling snarky. To this day I still don't know what got into me, probably trying to impress the girl. Don't you know any other insults besides Bussy? His friends laugh, mine continue to sit in scared silence. "You fucking Bussy." "Nope, that's still the same one." "You want to start something faggot." "Hey, there you go, get up Bussy," or "Man, you were doing good." His friends are really cracking up now, and he's getting pissed. He tries to goad me into getting up and fighting him, but never lays a hand on me, and through it all his friends are all laughing their ass off at him. Eventually I said something like, "Go sit down man, I'm not gonna fight you," and soon enough he does, but he keeps staring at me. I don't want to push my luck, so I don't say anything else. After the fact, I find out that they're working on some kind of gangbanger code of honor, which says that if he could get me to take the first shot at him, his friends could all jump me, but if he took the first shot then the fight was his to handle. Obviously he was even a bigger bussy than I was, because he was afraid to fight a 125-pound kid that was inches shorter than him. This kid was also in my gym class, and for the next few days he'd follow me around and talk crap. I was still scared of him, but wasn't going to do anything. At one point we are walking in a line to go outside, and he's right behind me. I turn, see him, then smirk and turn back around to ignore him. I was so scared he was going to shove me or something, but after a minute I turned around again, and he was gone. Never bothered me again. I can't think of one, but I remember a guy who had one in front of me. I had a college friend who I found in the lounge playing pool by himself one early evening. This was maybe a month into our freshman year. He asked what I was up to, and I guess I had been having problems with my sort of girlfriend. I related a few troubles as he listened, moving around the table sinking one ball after another. Finally he stopped, stood up straight, after sinking another ball. At this point I was thinking, wow, he's freaking amazing at pool, and said to me, well, your problem is she's the wrong girl. He said it so matter-of-factly that it seemed immediately right. I asked then who's the right girl. He lined up another shot. The last ball on the table struck the cue ball, sending it into the last ball, which started bouncing around the table. He stood up without watching any of the result of his strike, looked at me, said you already know who she is, handed me the stick, and walked out of the room without looking back as the last ball fell into the pocket. I stood there stunned, thinking about all of that, and this other girl I was becoming more interested in all the time at that point, and I think I said quietly, but still out loud, holy fuck, that was awesome. I broke up with my sorta girlfriend and pursued the other, and we dated happily for the rest of the school year. Then I found out my friend actually sucked at pool, but just had a ridiculously good string of luck on that one particular night, and he apparently also has an incredible poker face. It all seemed completely deliberate. Then I found out he was really into my sorta girlfriend and was trying to get me to date the other one so he could have her all to himself. Still, that few minute long spectacle was so bad as I forgave him entirely for his deceit. Gym class, junior year. On this particular day, we were inside playing basketball or some shit when one of the class hooligans, one of the most heinous punks in the whole grade, really, started harassing a female classmate. Along with a few onlookers, I watched from a distance at first, figuring the chick could defend herself, but when the hoodlum backed her into a corner and boxed her in with his hand against the wall, loudly making extremely lewd propositions, I got pissed. God knows what possessed me, a nerdy little white girl with limited social abilities and fewer athletic graces, to open my mouth. All I know is that out of the blue I screamed across the basketball court, she doesn't want you, dipshit. Leave her alone, dead. Silence reigned for approximately 4 seconds. Then the punk was suddenly right in front of me, screaming nonsensical obscenities 1 inch away from my face. How accomplished what came next remains a mystery, but is probably some combination of sheer luck, the adrenaline caused by having an 8-foot thug screaming in my face, or a straight up act of God. While the kid was still mid-fit, I enacted the only judo move I'd ever learned, and had never actually attempted before, and flipped him straight backwards. He landed hard on his back, and I sat on him. Homeboy never ever faked with me again, and I was everybody's gym class heroine for a good while afterwards. About a year ago, a friend and I decided to run out and grab tea. I made the executive decision to drive, and so we took off in my car on a 20-minute drive to the tea shop. Keep in mind that I have the attention span of a dead rat, so while talking to my friend in the car I lose focus on the road. Oopsie faking daisy. In a ho. So my buddy makes this funny joke, so I turn my head to laugh and comment back all while flying down a road at 55+ miles per hour. My friend stares forwards and screams, "Oh my god, look out." I look forward only to be greeted by the tail lights of the car in front of me. Apparently on this road lived a farmer who had opened a vegetable stand which sold quality vegetables for low prices. Cars were stopping to go into this farm stand, and so a short line of about 3 or 4 cars had formed in front of me. My memories of the next few seconds are very blurry, but as it was recounted to me, I swerved left to try and go into the oncoming lane to dodge the vehicles in front of me. Unfortunately for me, a Hummer was in that very lane steaming towards me. Immaculate plus front impact made by Hummer equals my imminent demise. so I swerved back to the right, barely missing the car which had come to a stop in front of me. I take the car off-road going straight at a telephone pole. I whip the wheel to the left and then back to the right to slide past the telephone pole and dodge a mailbox in front of me. Once again life decided to cheat on my chest by putting an old lady right in front of said mailbox. I've never seen an old lady Olympic long jump before, but she pulled it off in style, revealing an electric box behind her. Somehow dodging that, I pulled the car back onto the road while still going 55 miles per hour. Long story short, I, being a complete factard, wasn't paying attention to the road, dodged car in front of me, dodged an oncoming Hummer, drifted past a telephone pole, dodged a mailbox complete with old lady checking her mail, and dodged some kind of electrical box, all while going 55 miles per hour. And who says playing Grand Theft Auto 4 too much never pays off, aside from the fact that in Grand Theft Auto I'm trying to hit said old lady? I've had only one baddest moment in my life, and it was accidental, because all I wanted to do was smoke down at the beach in my town. I was driving to the beach to smoke a joint with my friend after work on day. As I was driving, two kids about my age pulled out right in front of this old couple driving in front of me, but they didn't turn, they were just sitting perpendicular in the middle of the road. They started honking and swearing at the old people. As they backed up, the old people sped up, and I shot them a look saying, "Come on guys, really?" Told them to stop, and a hand gesture. However, they thought I had given them the finger and were tailgating me, and I could see them in my mirror mouthing, "Oh, you faked up now punk, you're dead," all that shit. There were two of them and one of me, so I called my buddy who's a big motherfaker, but he was eating and didn't pick up. I eventually had to park since there was nowhere else to go. The kid comes running up to my door yelling shit at me, telling me he's gonna beat my ass, and he reeked of booze. I tried to talk him down, but he eventually spit on me, so I gave him a nice shove, and he hit me in the face. I luckily had started taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on weekends, and was able to defend myself. When he tried to tackle me, I ended up giving him a nice golf ball above his left eye and a cracked bloody lip. He blew a .28 at the police station and was arrested for a DUI, but I guess that's what happens when you fuck with old people. TLDR, drunk kids were messing with some old people down at my beach, tried to fight me, spit on me, and then I beat the stupid out of him. TLDR, asshole sucker punches me in back with little provocation in front of group of people. I laugh in his face. He looks really embarrassed and goes and sits down. In high school I was in really good shape because one of my primary hobbies was martial arts. I kept this hobby pretty tightly under wraps because a lot of people tended to make a big deal of it, and I like to pretty much keep to myself. I was at a high school retreat thing. It was a small private high school, and there wasn't much to do there besides play sand volleyball, which was okay with me because that was one of my other favorite pastimes. Anyway, there was this guy who had just started attending this school that semester, who was generally a complete asshole, especially to me, since I tended to be pretty quiet, and this bugged him for some reason. At one point, taking a break from volleyball, I went into the cafe next to the sandpit to grab a drink, and didn't put on my shirt, because I didn't want to get sand in it. It was only a high school there, so I wasn't walking into a room full of strangers or anything. I guess he thought I was showing off, because he got literally 1 foot behind me, puffed up his chest, and started strutting around behind me making fun of me. I just pretty much laughed it off and lightly shoved him in the chest with my fist. Okay, that sounds bad, but I really did barely touch him, and kept walking. He acted like I totally slammed him, and made some huge show of how badly I had hurt him. As I continued walking, he jumped back behind me and punched me in the back. It was really used to being punched, often even in the face, so I hardly felt anything at all, but this punch echoed in the room and everyone in the cafe turned and looked at us. There was a collective intake of breath like some serious shit was about to go down. A guy who knew me pretty well said, "Oh, shit," because he knew my background and thought he was about to get a demonstration. Not really thinking about how hard everyone thought he had hit me, I just turned around and laughed at him and slapped him on the shoulder. He looked very puzzled and deflated for a minute, and then just turned around and sat down. Later my friend explained to me what bad as I had looked, like just turning around and laughing at him after it looked like he laid into me. When I was in 6th grade, my school had this week-long field trip to science camp. The camp took place in a redwood-filled area of California, so basically everything was surrounded by enormous trees with a few clearings here and there. We played a lot of games during our stay, but one of them was this game where one of the kids from the group stayed in the middle of a clearing in one place and tried to find people who were hiding in the trees. It was called coyote something and was kind of like hide and seek, except you can't move if you're it, and when the person who is it gives up, they howl, and the first person to get back to the it person is it. Next point, this one girl from my class was it, and everyone immediately bolted off to the trees to hide. I was a pretty small kid, and I was also pretty lazy, so I looked around for a good place to hide. Our counselor, she was probably 18 or so, was sitting a few feet away from the girl who was it. I jumped behind our counselor and crouched down, hiding myself entirely behind her back in her shadow. I didn't think for a second it would work, but after the girl counted and called out all the names of the people she could see, she called the remaining people back in with a howl. I popped up from 4 or so feet away, hopped over in 2 jumps, and tagged her. She gave me this absolutely shocked look, and everyone stared at me in awe for a few moments. I felt so bad as I found her third on my turn, and sadly she ruined my turn by howling while I was still finding people. Everyone thought it was me, and they came running, so I guess she got the last laugh, even if it was by an underhanded method. Still, I felt pretty cool. I once got really mad at a girlfriend I had in junior high. It was a big angsty situation. There was this bully fella that used to give me trouble on occasion. Not really a bad guy ultimately, but seemed like a big bad guy to me. Anyway, long story short, I was pissed off enough on this occasion to just stalk right up to him and say let's fight. So he and a huge gang of his buddies and I all go down to a path around the corner from the school, out of sight of passers-by. Everybody surrounds us into a little ring, and I suddenly realize that I'm alone, and he's got all his friends in a circle around me. Perhaps in retrospect I could have been more selective in my timing. I was scared as shit and pretty sure I was going to die. Anyway, someone referees the fight. I had no real prior experience with fighting, and didn't realize just how bloody structured the whole thing was going to be. They might as well have charged faking admission. Dude grabs me in a headlock and starts wailing on my head with these flaccid little strokes that had little to no effect. After a number of iterations of this, I perversely started to get kind of bored. So I insulted him. I don't remember exactly. Something about how crappy his punches were probably. He spun me around and threw me down onto all fours. He was standing over me from behind, getting ready to respond or something. I saw my opening, pretty much in slow mo. Spun around while I stood up backwards, launching a fist directly into his face, perfectly timed with his jaw open mid-word, with all of the torque from my wound up body behind it. My first and last shot. He just goes down. I walked away with his girlfriend that day, no lie. In my adolescent mind I was faking awesome. I also cried my ass off afterwards, because I don't have the temperament to tolerate violence like that, even from myself. I used to live in Indianapolis and was riding to work downtown. I was riding south down a major street and crossing a one-way west. Someone blew through their light at 30 miles per hour. I tried to swerve out of the way, but couldn't. I ended up lifting my legs to at least end up on top of the car instead of under. I slid up the hood, nearly went through the windshield, shoulder checked the body between the windshield and door, and was then backwards on top of the car. The driver slammed on the brakes and swerved hard to the left. I flew off on the passenger side of the car, landing on my feet facing the opposite direction as the car. I ran backwards, but was still going too fast, ended up doing a backwards somersault and being back on my feet. I walked over and picked up my bike to get it out of the road. The driver got out and looked in the street where she expected to see me. The passenger starts to get out, but is looking shocked. The driver yells he must be under the car. The passenger nearly faints and falls back into her seat. I indented the windshield in more than 6 inches right in front of her face. I from the sidewalk, holler that I'm okay and wave. Though the arm I waved with was the one that ended up with hundreds of pieces of glass in it, so had started bleeding a lot by this point. I put down that arm and waved with the other arm. The people who saw the wreck ran over and congratulated me on my acrobatics. They also said they were surprised I wasn't killed. I was a 7th grader and we were in the gym with 8th graders. They started doing stiff arms hand to face while we were playing basketball. It was me that was getting most of this bullshit, so I started getting vocal and went on a shouting match with them. One of them thought it would be fun to threaten pegging me with these extremely hard and overpressurized volleyballs. I'm a chubby kid and I just yelled, "Fuck you," and he threw that faker straight at my stomach. I jumped up tucking my leg in so it would hit my legs instead of my stomach. It was the best move I could have possibly done because when I tucked my knees up to block my stomach, I kneed the volleyball directly back at him accidentally. That motherfucking ball went straight to his face. Fuck yeah. So the whole 8th grade class of boys, somewhere around 15 of them, just pretty much knew an ass beating was coming for me. 3 of them pinned me to the wall. I don't have memory of the rest of this because my tears of fear making me blind and the mix of elation made the adrenaline just kick in. Apparently all the 8th grade guy took turns punching me. My friends and classmates just sort of watched and some ran for the principal. And just to exemplify how much of a loser I was, I cried for the rest of the day in class with my head down on my desk. TLDR, I was a 7th grade loser that ricocheted a hard-skinned volleyball off my knee and back at assaulter's face. I think I missed the point about being badass, but I felt badass. I'm sure nobody will see this buried at the bottom, but here goes. My brother and I were traveling across state overnight in my car. About halfway, I pulled over and let him drive while I napped in the passenger seat. Next thing I knew, we were swerving down the freeway, spun around and slid down an embankment and stopped about 10 feet from a cliff, but buried in that big, deep gravel. Now we're facing the wrong way in deep gravel and on the side of an embankment at a fairly steep angle. It was early morning, but about 4 or 5 cars and a semi pulled over to see if we were okay. My brother is obviously shaken. Apparently, he was tiredly reaching down for his lighter that he dropped, saw he had swerved, and overcompensated. I was on pure adrenaline and pissed as hell. After looking at the car to make sure we had everything still, I yelled at him to get in the passenger seat, yelled up at everyone that we were okay, and got back in the car. Somehow, I managed to spin the car back around, go up the embankment and right back on the freeway in one grand motion. Looking back, it was quite stupid to try being that close to cliff and the steep angle we were at, but I didn't want to be late or be towed, and I was raging. I like to imagine it was pretty badass to witness, but I'm quite sure I couldn't do that again, no matter how hard I tried. One time I was driving down a packed highway on Christmas Eve. I was in my little S15 pickup. The roads were slick with slush and patches of ice, so I was trying to drive at a safe speed in the right lane, while dozens of idiots passed me at 70 miles per hour on the left. Well, some idiot in an SUV decides to pass another idiot on the right, but when she hits the patch of slush between the lanes, she instantly loses traction, overcorrects, and starts spinning out in the middle of the road. Instantly, all 6 cars in front of me are all losing control. It was one of those moments where you have very little time to decide what to do. The smart thing, of course, is to veer right, and that's what I started to do as I braked carefully. But the lead idiot had slid sideways all the way into the right shoulder sideways, and I couldn't navigate around her. So I veered left around the back of her, still going perhaps 40 miles per hour, and about 4 car lengths in front of her was another woman who was instinctively stopping in the middle of the highway for no good reason. I veered right around her and made it onto the shoulder. But I still had too much speed, and I slid off the edge of the road onto the grassy hill next to the highway and slid down about 100 feet. Before I came to a stop point, I hopped out of the truck, prepared to run and help anyone who was injured. And as I looked, a big rig truck, which was still moving nearly at speed, navigated on the shoulder into the spot I would have been in if I'd stopped on the shoulder. If I'd still been there, he would have plowed into me or one of the other stopped vehicles. All in all, I think there were 14 damaged vehicles. I'd been right in the middle of it, and not a scratch on my truck. Nobody was seriously injured. I gave my reports about the accident, and a fleet of tow trucks cleared away the damaged vehicles. Finally it was just me, at the bottom of the hill. The state trooper who was writing up the paperwork looked down at it and said, "Nice driving, son." I went down and tried to drive out of there, but the wet grass wouldn't give me any traction. I was dreading paying for a tow up the hill. All of a sudden, 6 firefighters and 2 state troopers walked down the hill and pushed me all the way back to the highway with a firm "Merry Christmas." In high school our football team was very terrible, but for some reason the footballers still felt macho/head honcho. Why? No one seemed to pay them any mind. However, there was one jock in particular who was especially skeezy and would make fun of people on the daily. I wasn't a prom queen or anything. I was nominated for homecoming princess though, which is somehow still validating in a sad, sick way. I digress. But I was friends with many different people. I was sort of a neutral, friendly person. Well, apparently this particular boy got his jockstrap in a twist when I stuck up for the cheerleaders he and his cronies were tormenting during a rally. Ironically, the cheerleaders were the only people who really cheered the team on at games, and were somehow blamed for the team constantly losing, claiming that they lost because the girls were ugly, not the fact that they were unskilled. Well, not only did my sticking up for the girls piss him off, but apparently the way I dressed did too. I wore vintage clothes. Generally, I just dressed how I felt, was aesthetically pleasing to me mostly. So he began this hilarious game of throwing grenades at me, and I mean, invisible grenades. One day, out of the corner of my eye I spotted him in the act. I looked down to the ground, mimicked picking the thing up, and threw it back at him, making a big explosion noise with hand gestures and all. I winked and walked away. Found out a year or 2 ago that he was attracted to me. He must have been confused. 2nd grade tactics work on so many other girls. This could go in the "I almost died/accidental baddest moment" category. The day I got my motorcycle license I went to go for a nice long twilight ride. Well, I made it about a mile away from my house when someone decided they'd really like to tailgate me. We are talking maybe 2 feet between us. I decide to play nice and continue cruising, still going about 8 to 9 over, because I'm out to enjoy myself. Suzuki Intruder 1500s aren't meant for fast turns or screwing with tailgaters. They're meant for, you guessed it, cruising. Well, things got complicated when a deer decides to bolt out in front of me as I come to a nice banked left-hand turn, and I have the joy of trying to figure out how much brake I need to give it. So I miss the deer, but don't have Mr. Tailgater run up my bum. As it pans out I fishtail and wind up with my back wheel almost perpendicular to the front on my right side, as much as it would let it, and find myself in a nice completely unintentional drift. I did the only thing I knew to do in that scenario, which was crank the accelerator or pray for the best. I somehow powered out of it and left a nice cloud of smoke behind me. I just started laughing because I couldn't believe I didn't drop it, hit the deer, or get run over, or a combination of the 3, and the icing on the cake was that Mr. Tailgater kept his distance until we parted ways. I have 2. The first was when I was in 6th grade. I used to take the bus home, and while riding on the bus, we used to play this card game where 2 players flip cards down by turns, and when there are 2 sequential cards of the same type, 2s or jacks etc., any combo, played one after an or her, the person to slap the stack first gets the cards. So, I'm watching these older kids play in the seat next to me, and just for kicks, I start calling out random cards like Queen of Spades, 6 of Clubs, etc. I somehow correctly predicted the first 4 cards they threw down in a row, and freaked out the players another time. In my senior year of high school, my grandpa had given me an 80 to Lebaron, and told me, if I could fix it, I could have it. So I spent the entire summer rebuilding the engine. One morning, we woke up and headed to the shop, but stopped off at the auto parts store first. On the way out we merged onto a highway and started accelerating up to 60 miles per hour or so. At this time, I was half asleep, so I started daydreaming. I imagined that the engine of the van we were in exploding and catching fire. I then imagined myself leaning out the window and guiding my grandpa on where to go so we could pull off. Just then, the hood of the engine flew back and smashed into the windshield, shattering it. Because I had thought about this, I immediately guided him off the road safely despite the heavy traffic. After we managed to get back to the shop, he asked how I knew what to do so quickly, and I told him what I imagined immediately before. We laughed about it. My dad went to bed, and it was around midnight or a bit after when I started brushing my teeth. Our area has had a lot of break-ins lately, and I'd been hounding my parents to start locking the doors. I had already locked the front door, but not the back. I heard the screen door open and my dog start barking. Then the door shut. I walked to my room and grabbed a Red Ryder BB gun, closest thing available that resembled a club, then went down the stairs. The front door was still closed, but my dog was still going crazy, and I heard an engine out front start up. I decided to head out the back door and catch them in case they stole my bike off the front porch point. As I was about to go out the back door, a cell phone came on in the hand of someone walking up the stairs. I thought, fuck, the back door is unlocked, and they decided to come around from the front. I ducked back partially into a doorway, and while they opened the door quietly moved forward ready to knock them back out and down the stairs. A fraction of a second before I yelled the predetermined "What the fuck are you doing in my house?" the burglar noticed me and gasped. I recognized the voice as my sister, who was getting back from several days away from home, and nobody had told me. We had a good laugh, and I actually felt a little disappointed at the anticlimactic ending. Was in PE class and standing in line for something. This smaller kid from my grade who used to pick on me a lot, he always had some friends behind him, felt pretty cocky that day, and was standing next to me in line. Probably because the hottest chick of the class and some other popular types were standing close. I don't really remember how it escalated to what it did, but I think he made some shitty remark and I gave him some back in the hopes of not being completely humiliated. So he decides that he wants to kick me in the balls for what I said. It really wasn't that exceptional, and does so. Except out of pure reflex I blocked his kick with both my palms, and in the same motion locking them around his ankle point. So now I'm standing there, looking at his foot in my hands, and he is doing the same. We both look up and get eye contact, realizing what just went down. His grin deflates just as rapidly as one spreads across my face. We both know what's going to happen now. It felt like a minute, but this must all have happened in a matter of seconds, because before I knew it, I was thrusting his foot as hard in the air as I possibly could, sending him flying, and land flat on his back with a hard impact on the gym floor. Next second everyone, including the hot chick, is laughing their ass off at him getting owned so hard, and the other guys who saw it were like, what the fuck, Son Goku, oh my god, fighting. Pro and awesome sheet. Like that point the douche never dared to make a physical move again, and I felt pretty damn awesome about it. I was in high school in a home ec class cooking something and need to clean my hands off, but there were no towels near me. Someone across the room calls over to a friend on the clear other side of the room to throw a roll of paper towels to them. I see this fresh roll passing over my head and have the bright idea to intercept it so I can grab a few. I reach up with one hand barely looking and miss the roll, but somehow manage to rip off a single sheet as it continues unhindered to its destination. Everyone in the class was dumbfounded and spent the rest of the time trying to recreate my amazing feat. Once I was snowboarding in Colorado and was following the lift line down the hill on a backcountry run. I can hold my own snowboarding, so whenever you are under the lift you have to show off a little. The trail ahead comes to a peak, so my plan is to hit it hard and do a 360 off of it. As I'm going up, I catch my front edge and start to fall over forward. I reach forward with my left hand as my right goes down to my board. Somehow I find myself stalled on the peak of this hill upside down, on one hand grabbing the board with the other, like I'm a skateboarder on a half pipe. Momentum then carries me over and I bring the board down and continue on the other side. Everyone on the lift is cheering at me, and I'm just wondering how I didn't eat it hard. I've never done anything like that before or since. When I was in college, I played on an intramural dodgeball team with my roommates and other good friends. Yes, it was basically just like the movie Dodgeball, except we had 10 people on a team. Yes, that is simultaneously incredibly geeky and amazingly awesome. Point to get back to the point. In a game we were playing once, I charged forward to the far right of center line and was just about to rocket the ball at a guy hanging out near the left side of court. I notice someone with a ball coming at me, and it's too late to really change directions or anything. So I figure the only thing I can do is make myself as small a target as possible. People often miss each other from 3 or 4 feet away due to how quickly everything is happening. He throws the ball at my legs when he's about 6 feet away, and I immediately change my stance to bring my legs together so I might avoid being hit. I figure I'm probably toast at this point. As my knees come together, I feel the ball brushing the insides of my legs. Looking down, I manage to catch the ball between my knees. The guy who threw the ball and myself are looking at it like, what the fuck? I start to put down the ball in my hand and walk off the court when the referee darts forward, points at the guy who threw the ball at me, and says, "You're out, TLDR. Caught a ball with my knees in a dodgeball game." Ref calls the other guy out. I was at a small party in college, hanging out having a beer. There were probably 15 guys and maybe 2 girls at this party. It was a tech school and sadly this was pretty much par for the course. Girls were hard to come by. One of the girls there was visiting her brother from out of town, was smoking hot, and of course every guy was trying to talk to her. I'm not down with the vulture effect, so I'm just chillin' watching the beer pong game going on. A couple of my friends were playing against these 2 dudes. One of the dudes was notorious for a really short temper and getting into fights. I always thought the guy was a douche. Earlier in the night he gave the hot girl a dollar bill with his number on it. Douchey. Anyway, the douche starts getting heated over losing at beer pong, and my friends who had started out friendly were getting uncomfortable. I'm normally very non-confrontational, but I had had it with this guy ruining parties. I walked across the room, got in his face, and asked, "Is there some sort of problem, douche?" He looks at me, starts trying to intimidate me, and sticks a finger in my chest. I just stand there looking at him stone-faced. Helps that I was taller. He backs off, and I go to grab a beer. Here's the unexpected part. The hot girl that I had been ignoring the entire evening saw everything, and apparently was totally turned on by the Cro-Magnon display. I left about 30 minutes later, while I was saying goodbye to people, and she came over and asked to come along with me. I was stunned, but of course agreed. Eventually she ended up banging half of my friends as well, but at least I was the first. In 4th grade I was getting ready for the last game of my Little League Major season by warming up with a friend. Instead of wearing my handy dandy slightly longer first baseman's mitt, I was the star first baseman, and he was the second baseman, so we always threw together, so we could pull double plays more efficiently. I decided to wear my infielder's glove for some reason. This turned out to be a terrible choice. One of the throws from my friend nicked the end of my glove and hit me square in the right eye. Thankfully, I was wearing glasses, and they didn't break either, so my eyeball was safe. What followed was about a 5-minute episode that started with shock that turned into utter pain and crying with a conclusion of "I'm okay. I want to play." My dad, being the awesome dad and coach that he was, believed me and let me play center field even with an eye that was quickly turning black and blue. In the course of the game I think I went 2 for 3 and managed to catch a pop fly with no depth perception. The most stunning thing afterwards was when one of the mothers looked at me up close, shrieked in horror, and then showed me her MacBook mirror so I could see my eye. I knew it was bad, but holy cow. I was nearly reinventing the violet side of the rainbow on my face. So off to the emergency room I go. It turns out I fractured the bone that helps to support my eye, and that for the rest of the summer I couldn't do myriad things, such as swimming in the deep end of pools, playing more baseball, or anything that could remotely harm my face. It was this accident that made me left eye dominant, created the habit of me sleeping with at least 5 to 7 pillows. I had to make sure I didn't accidentally hit anything with my head or fall off the bed during that long summer, and made many a girl during field day wince in horror at the ugliness of my eye. TLDR, I played a baseball game with a freshly broken bone under my eye and still did relatively well, for Little League standards of course. Just 5 days ago, I was waiting on my flight at Gatwick Airport. I was wandering around the terminal bored out of my mind. Took the escalator up and was lost in my own thoughts. Hadn't slept that night, so my mind was hazy. Suddenly the woman in front of me falls back and collapses onto me and I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm stumbling backwards in the middle of the escalator, trying to hold my balance and wondering what was going on. The woman, who had fallen back on me, managed to pull herself to the other side, at which point another man was stumbling backwards down onto me at full force. I grabbed the handrail and turned to see who was behind me, a group of young kids who were frozen in shock, probably seeing their short lives pass before their eyes, and I gripped the handrail as hard as I could, holding on to this guy so he didn't slip and finally fall back onto his back, probably bashing in the back of his head and whatever other damage from rolling down the escalator. Harming other people, the kids, on the way. It seemed, no matter how hard I held him up, he could not straighten himself. He kept falling back, which made me, annoyedly, think he might have been drunk off his head. In the end, I don't think he was though. Finally his wife at the top of the escalator stopped the escalator and he finally managed to stand up. My hand was a bit mangled at this point, because I was just grabbing the rail as hard as I could, and was grabbing the metal bit as well as the rubber, which caused a burn on my hand. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. I asked if everyone was okay, and then walked up to the top of the escalator, where the man had joined with his wife, and said to them with a smile, "Disaster averted." I walked off on my merry way, but I overheard a couple thank the woman who had first fallen against me, and then pulled herself away from the carnage. They thanked her for saving him. She hadn't at all. She just jumped out of the way. That made me really what the fuck for a moment, but, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I needed my coffee. I was a trainer for the football team in high school at a home game. I think it might have been homecoming, actually. I was standing on the other side of the field from the line of scrimmage. I was standing on their 30. Play was coming off of our 20 give or take point problem #1. I was having my back to the field during a play. I was having a conversation with one of the other trainers and wasn't expecting a long play since we were winning point problem #2. Having a conversation means that I wasn't really listening to my coach scream for everyone to get the fuck out of the way. Because of problems #1 and #2, I was unable to see what was going on behind me. The trainer I was talking to walked about 8 feet backwards from me. I gave him a puzzled look, then realized what was happening and turned around. Our running back had broken through into the secondary and was screaming down the sideline full speed. Their safety tackled him about 5 yards into the field and was still on top of him, sliding on the ground at a full sprint, right towards me. Counting pads, it was probably about 500 pounds of dude sliding towards me. I followed my first instinct and tried to jump over them as high as I could. Before I could pick my knees up, the safety's shoulder pads clipped my shins, and because of the marvels of physics, I began doing a front flip. The first front flip turned into a second front flip with a half twist. I then proceeded to land in a sitting position on top of their safety, not really sure which way was up. Facing the student section of the stands, I stared at them for a solid 3 count before everyone started cheering. Our running back, realizing what had happened, started yelling for me to get off of him. He was being crushed under our combined weight. I made the highlight reel for that Friday and wound up being declared hit of the year for that season, in a viewer-based poll, no less. I was once playing in a dodgeball tournament at school. It was a big Greek fundraiser, so it was quite the social event. Anyways, my team made it to the final game which everyone was watching. I'm pretty athletic, but I wasn't the best thrower, so I relied on dodging and getting easy hits/catching. Well, my teammate count slowly went down as the other team had what seemed to be aimbot mech drones as players. I end up being the last one standing, and there are 4 of them. This is where the absolutely most baddest moment in my life occurs. One of their guys chunks it at my face, so I flattened out on the floor in push-up position. Another player rockets another shot straight at my torso, so I push up with all my might, and the ball goes directly between me and the floor without touching me. Everyone at this point starts making noise, and as I jump up to my feet, the last 2 guys simultaneously throw this. I stand up, and both miss me, one in front of me, and one behind me in perfect timing as I straightened up. Since this was a gym, the balls bounced back and all 4 had balls again. The impossible happens. They all throw and all 4 balls are in perfect trajectory to hit me. Somehow, someway, by some hidden powers, I jump up and do the Spider-Man dodging goblin bombs move, and as I'm horizontal in the air looking up, one ball flies inches above my head, another below my back, one between my legs and the last one between my upper arm and torso. Needless to say, everyone just stood there as I landed in Spider-Man position. Then the crows erupted as the other team stood there dumbfounded. We lost when I dropped a ball I was catching, but after that day everyone thought I was some sort of ninja. A ninja, I say. I went to some party a few years back and there was a live band playing with a bunch of kids in a circle mosh pit. Nothing too violent or crazy, but there was this jocko looking guy standing on the side punching people as they went by. He would then laugh to his friends and then turn and punch people as they danced by. I was standing a few feet away from him and was really getting pissed off at him, so I jumped in the pit and began going around in the circle on the outer edge so that I would be close enough for him to punch me. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to do something. So I'm going around, and as I come near him, I get closer, so I know that he'd swing at me, and he did. Right as he punches, I stop short and his arm extends in front of me, missing me. I turned and grabbed him by his chest, literally lifting him off the ground in a moment of adrenaline-filled rage. He was bigger than I was. I lifted him by his pecs and began to run with him down the hall as the whole crowd split wide open to let me through. The entire time I was staring the guy right in the eyes. I ran him down the hall and slammed him into the mirror on the bathroom wall at the end of the hall. As his back hit the mirror and cracked it, I was still locked eye to eye with him, and at that moment I kind of came to and realized what I had just done and dropped him. I turned and walked out. The crowd was speechless and staring at me as my friend who I was with just jumped and yelled and cheered. I just walked out of the party and we left. I attended a pretty awful secondary school, high school to you Americans. It's pretty renowned for being one of, if not the worst school in my city. Anyway, on a mild day, I'm in a class with no teacher and out of nowhere, people start throwing shit at each other. Pencils, pens, rubbers, erasers to you Americans, even metallic pencil sharpeners. We are talking at relatively high speed too. Nobody gave a fuck. Again, this is a mild day. On extreme days, we are talking bricks through bus windows, pupils with knives, people getting ganged up on by several others, hair being set on fire, etc. Being as it's rather fun, if not quite dangerous, I joined in. After a few throws, I pick up an eraser and hurl it across the classroom. It swings in at an angle and lands in my intended target's shirt pocket. We stared at each other in disbelief for a good 5 seconds. Most people noticed. I felt like a faking king. In the same class I also threw a polo mint, and it managed to hit a quiet introvert who never really got involved with these things at all. It was again flying at an awesome angle, and landed between his glasses and his face, and ricocheted off his glasses, and hit him in the eye. I've never laughed so hard, and felt so awful at the same time. I was in a moral pickle. A couple of weeks later, I apologized to him, which made me feel even more of a bad, as because I apologized for something I was truly sorry for. There was also a moment where me and a few friends were playing football, soccer, outside of school. A group of other kids, socially higher ranking, approached us and attempted to take our football, specifically one guy from said crowd, whilst the others watched. Nobody in my group of friends did anything to stop him, and on reflection, I don't blame them, since they really weren't built at all. Scrawny, if anything. I was, and still am, if not more, somewhat built, quite broad and tall, 6 foot. However, I didn't have anywhere near the self-confidence I have today. Nevertheless, I grabbed possession of the football. Before he could get to it, he started threatening me with the usual stuff you'd expect, ending with "give me the faking football" or something along those lines, to which I'd calmly reply no. He pushed and shoved and feigned a few punches and headbutts as means of intimidation, to which I was prepared to take, before retaliating with absolute force. At the time, I had it installed in myself never to strike first, which, while physically tactically unsound, I disliked starting fights, and think violence solves very little, and should solve nothing. His friends in the crowd initially were egging him on, but as soon as I showed resistance and saw my face, apparently I look like a serial killer when I'm serious, they were telling him to back off and that it wasn't worth it. He pussied out of what he started and they went on their merry way. This one is hard to describe, so bear with me. I was on a pair of crutches after wrenching my knee. After going stir crazy stuck at home for several days, I decided to go visit my friend who lived in a second floor apartment. I got up his stairs okay. The visit went okay. Then it was time to leave and go back downstairs. I forgot that going downstairs on crutches you are supposed to put the crutches down on the lower step first, then use your feet. I proceeded to step down from the top stair with the crutches under my armpits. Then suddenly I was flying hurtling down the stairs towards the distinct possibility of some injury much worse than a wrenched knee. Yeah, I had accidentally launched myself downwards in the air with the crutches instead of using them properly. I remember that split second, hurtling downwards, not even time to think. My hands reached out on each side to grab something. Anything, and I felt my hands simultaneously catching both handrails on either side. That interrupted my trajectory of flying down the stairs face first. My body swung underneath the configuration of my arms and hands gripping the handrails on either side. The next thing I knew, I had landed perfectly on my butt, 3 stairs from the bottom of the incline. My crutches then rattled past me and landed on the ground. To say the least, I sat in shock on that stair for a good 5 minutes. I know now that technically it was bad as I made my way home, I remember simply mumbling to the sky a lot and getting some serious religion. In my junior year of high school, I was in a ceramics class where we sat at large tables of 8 or so people each. The kid next to me was a senior, but was an almost unbelievably stereotypical nerd. He was probably 5 feet 8 inches and 100 pounds, bad acne, half-inch thick glasses with black rims, bad posture, etc. 2 bulky seniors at the same table spent the entire semester making his life miserable. They would constantly verbally harass him, steal his watch, and even occasionally destroy his ceramics project when he would get up to get a new tool. Of course, the nerd never said or did anything to stop this. Near the end of the semester, I finally had enough. While they were taunting him, I stood up and quietly said, "You should try picking on someone who can defend themselves. Don't touch or speak to him again, or I would like nothing more than to make this point clearer to you two outside the classroom, being that this was a long time ago. I forget the exact wording, but it was pretty close to this." The 2 jocks never said a word in class for the rest of the semester. I count this as unintentional badassery because it turns out one of the witnesses at our table was my girlfriend's sister, whom I had never been introduced to, but evidently had objected strongly to her sister's choice of boyfriends. TLDR, stood up to larger stronger bullies attacking a poor kid. Turns out my girlfriend's sister was a witness.